Hello and welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey. My name is Art, and today we continue our exploration of Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and particularly the 60th anniversary edition. We're finishing up the final part of Book 1, called The Hearth and the Salamander. Before we get too far into today's discussion, I want to go back to some of the comments that have been left in the previous videos, and today we'll go all the way back to the first video. And I had a comment left by Kelly Ann Mitchell, and she's been reading along, and I really appreciate your reading along with us and your commenting. And she said that, and this goes all the way back talking about Neil Gaiman's introduction, and she said she was blown away by it, and I expected nothing less from him, as his writing is enthralling. His introduction says so much about the book and the way our society, if we're not careful, where we can possibly end up. And then she also pointed out two quotes that resonated with her, the same quotes I had shared in that video, that fiction is a lie that tells us true things over and over. And if someone tells you what a story is about, they are probably right. If they tell you that is all the story is about, they are definitely wrong. And then she said she could say more about it, but it could turn into an essay. Kellyanne, I would love to read that essay. I think I commented that. But I keep thinking about what Gaiman said about how fiction is a lie that tells us true things over and over. And I just really like that. And in light of the pages that we were reading today, I think, I don't know, it gave it some more weight to it in these pages that I read. Because Montag is going to be faced with truth that maybe he is really struggling with, and it completely changes his worldview based on what happened in the last section we read with the woman lighting herself on fire, and we see how that is really affecting him in these pages. Let's see, a couple others commented a few things, but I wanted to read what Amy Schmelzer 6445 left a comment, and she said, I recently read Fahrenheit 451, but my copy was printed in the 90s. Thank you for discussing Gaiman's intro, which wasn't in mine. And that, I just want to say, after we finish the story itself, my edition has a bunch of essays in the back that I'll be talking about and sharing. If you have that copy, you can read with us, but if you don't, I'm hoping to, like the intro video, give enough of the information from those articles to talk about it. But then I had mentioned digital books and how if we have the book in hard copy, it is easier to keep it in its original state. Digital can be changed very easily, perhaps alarmingly so. But she said digital books, while great, have the chance to be edited easily like was done in 1984's world. I will always be pro physical books. It's proof that some truth existed at the time of publication. Anything digital can be modified, and we don't know who or what or when or why. And I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but that is something we're seeing more and more of, especially with with this invention of AI technology and how it's been used to create like deep fakes and writing things, different things like that. It can be a lot of fun to play with, but we got to be careful too, because people are starting to make videos of people saying and doing things that that weren't original. It's really amusing until you realize, wait a minute, we could have these guys say anything we wanted, and if we didn't realize it's fake, it's getting to the point where it's going to be harder and harder to tell the difference between what's real and what's not. I mean, and who knows? Maybe this video is fake. Maybe I'm just some kind of Android computer simulated program on some person's desktop in some far-flung corner of the galaxy, and none of this is real. Well, I guess I'm having an existential crisis right now. Before I go too farther down that dark hole, I want to thank them, the ladies who commented, and several others had commented, like Pick Your Pop Culture Poison commented, love this book. The first page alone is beautiful, and I couldn't agree more. Absolutely wonderful book. But let's go ahead and dive into the book today, and we'll get started on our discussion as we finish out the first part of Fahrenheit 451. essentially what happens here, we have a lot of discussion. We have dialogue heavy section, so it read pretty quickly. Montag decides the next day he's not going to go to work. He's, I think, in shock over what happened to that woman. He's rethinking everything. He's been faced, with fiction, with books, and the power of those stories that has driven this woman to martyr herself for the cause has really shaken Montag. He saw somebody die. That's gonna affect you. And I like how it describes, like, he can smell the kerosene on his hands and it makes him sick. And his wife, is not really caring one way or the other. She's basically telling him to get over it. Captain Beatty shows up and engages in some conversation and explanation about their history. We get a really kind of tense moment towards the end of this first part where, I think he knows that Montag took a book. And he tells him, basically, you have 24 hours to bring it back. And so after, and I'll go back and cover some of this, but after he leaves, Montag decides to show Mildred what was in the grate. We saw something was lurking up there. He opens the grate and all these books fall out. He had been taking them over and over the past few months, past year, I don't know. And it's almost like he's forgetting that he did that. And then the knock on the door comes back, and you really get this tense moment where Montag is surrounded by all these illegal books. His wife is going a little crazy in fear, and they think it's Beatty coming back, and they are quiet and don't answer the door. Whoever it was finally leaves, and he picks up a book and basically says, well, okay, let's see what this is all about. And that's where we are left off in part 1. There were a few things I wanted to bring out and talk about a little bit more. One is when Beatty and Montag are talking, Beatty talks about how information started coming quicker and easier and in shorter bursts. So let me read some of what Beatty says. He says, picture it, 19th century man with his horses, dogs, carts, slow motion. Then, in the 20th century, speed up your camera. Books cut shorter, condensations, digests, tabloids, everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending. Then he goes on to say, classics cut to fit 15-minute radio shows, then cut again to fill a 2-minute book column, winding up at last as a 10 or 12-line dictionary resume. I exaggerate, of course. The dictionaries were for reference, but many were those whose sole knowledge of Hamlet— you know the title certainly, Montag. It is probably only a faint rumor of a title to you, Mrs. Montag— whose sole knowledge, as I say, of Hamlet, was a 1-page digest in a book that claimed, now at last you can read all the classics, keep up with your neighbors. Do you see? Out of the nursery, into the college, and back to the nursery. There's your intellectual pattern for the past 5 centuries or more. Another paragraph, he says, speed up the film, Montag, quick. Click, pick, look, I, now, flick, here, there, swift, pace, up, down, in, out, why, how, who, what, where, bang, smack, wallop, bing, bong, boom. Digest, digests, digest, digest, digest. Politics, 1 column, 2 sentences, a headline. Then in midair, all vanishes. Whirl man's mind around so fast under the pumping hands of publishers, exploiters, broadcasters, that the centrifuge flings off all unnecessary, time-wasting thought. And I don't know a page that more accurately described our time now than this, from what I've read. Montag's point, or Beatty's point, is that everything started coming faster and faster, boiled down to more bite-sized content of information. There are programs and websites you can subscribe to that will give you summaries of what books are about and nonfiction books are about. And again, they might be a useful tool, but it could also lead you down a very dangerous path. I remember when I first came across those Reader Digests, condensed versions of the classics, I thought it was the most horrible thing I'd ever seen. Like, why would you want to edit down a story when you could just go and read the full thing? But, I was a teenager at the time, and I suppose they have their purpose. If it gets people reading, I suppose that's a good thing. But what Beatty is talking about is how we have just gotten used to things coming faster, quicker, and smaller. And when you condense like that, you lose the depth and you can manipulate it very easily. For example, just a couple weeks ago, everyone was on my Facebook feed, everyone was sharing this post from a website that said they were going to remake the film It's a Wonderful Life with Brendan Fraser and Christina Applegate. And that's and the post itself said that Hollywood was remaking It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, it said very clearly in the headline they were going to remake the film, and it was going to star, these two actors. And so many people in the comments were so angry because the original is such a classic, and they say, "How dare they remake this? This is terrible," and all those things. So I went and read the original post, and the article itself does not match the headline. The article said that they would actually be, what was actually happening is that Brendan Fraser and Christina Applegate, I think it was, they're going to be doing a table read of It's a Wonderful Life. They did it over Zoom, and they did it for charity. You could pay money to be a part of the Zoom call and watch the table read happen live, and the money would go to charity. And so that is so different from what the article, from what the headline suggested it might be, that they were able to manipulate people to respond and to share and all those things. And it also turns out that this article was from last year, and people were sharing it as if it were new information that came out that was coming this year. So be very careful about things like that. Do the research, read the article. You will find that they often do not match the headline. But because we get used to ingesting information in just quick, short sound bites, we are easily manipulated. That was kind of an eye-opener for me. And there's been others like that. Be very, very careful. I don't want to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, but media can be very easily manipulated. So be careful. But that's in Fahrenheit 451's world. That's what has led. That's what led to the world that we find Montag living in. So I thought that part was extremely interesting. Another quote I thought was interesting was that as Beatty, in continuing Beatty's conversation, he said that a book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of the well-read man? And he goes on to talk about how, as technology and society advanced, houses were fireproof now. There's no need for firemen. So they use them instead to start fires to put out the intellectual fires that were happening because of books. What I found interesting is the quote he said, that a book was a loaded gun. So they take the shot from the weapon and they burn it. So it becomes harmless. A gun is essentially harmless if it doesn't have bullets. What I find ironic about this is that there are people today who, if they don't directly express this thought, that's their actions do, that they look at a book as being very dangerous, and so they ban it or want to see it banned. But I guess, I don't know if is ironic the right word, but it's odd. But they won't look at banning actual guns. And I know that gets into a whole discussion about what our constitutional rights are to bear arms and things like that. And I don't necessarily want to get into that today. But think about that. But this is where I have to get a little political, that guns do far more harm than books do. And yet we're banning books instead of guns, you see. Or at the very least, putting common sense gun laws in place to help better prevent, guns falling into the wrong people's hands. And if they do, there's going to be harsher penalties, things like that. The actual weapon, they're fine with, but the books, oh, we can't have that. And so they banned them. Again, I don't want to go too far down that trail, but you get the point I'm trying to make, is that I found that to be very interesting quote in light of things that have happened in our culture today. Then Beatty and Montag were talking about Clarice, and Beatty thought that was better off dead. And Beatty again talks about what their culture is like, that basically give them facts rather than knowledge. That is such a subtle difference, but it's really interesting, right? He says, give them, contests to win by remembering words on a page, or popular songs, or name all the capitals, or how much corn grew in Iowa last year, which, around here, there was a lot. I don't know what the facts are there, but give them so many facts that they feel like they're intelligent, but all they have is facts. They don't have knowledge. They don't have wisdom. That idea of wisdom being, applied knowledge, or, there's an old saying around here that says, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put a tomato in your fruit salad. That's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I think the way Bradbury is using the word knowledge here is that same sense of wisdom, that, we can just distract and cram people's minds. We have created false intellectuals to say, I know a lot of facts, but do you have wisdom? Do you know how to apply those facts? And I think that's what books teach us, partly. I mean, life experience, all these things teach us wisdom, but stories teach us wisdom and knowledge, how to apply the facts we know. And if we take that away, we're left our brains full of so-called facts that can be easily manipulated, as we've seen. And, I could just sit here and confidently say, last year, Iowa sold 65 million pounds of corn. Is that true or not? I don't know. I just make it up. You sound confident, have a chart or something, and boy, you look official. Information, at the heart of the story, it's about the control of information. And we see in this world, in Fahrenheit 451, how it was easily manipulated and changed and used and denied the population, and ended up being able to control them and make them completely dependent on their government, which, as we get some of the context of the background here, which is currently, from the sounds of it, very unstable, with wars being threatened. Another thing I wanted to just bring up was, after Beatty left, Montag and Mildred were talking, and she could tell that he was feeling stressed. So she tells Montag to go drive fast, just get out. And she said she does that all the time. That she will even hit things like animals. She won't even care, and it made me wonder, wow, what are you doing there, Mildred? And did she, Clarice supposedly, possibly was killed by somebody running her over with a car. And I wondered if there's a connection there. I can't remember. So that's a little thought I had. But anyway, that's just a small thing there. But then again, it continues on that the books are discovered. Montag reveals the books in the grate. They're not sure where. They start reading these different lines, and I had to kind of laugh because Montag read one line from the middle of a book, and Mildred's like, "Oh, that doesn't make any sense. We'll never know. We'll never understand." And so basically, Montag says, "Well, we'll start over at the beginning." And as the musical says, that's a very good place to start, and that's a very good place to end part 1 of Fahrenheit 451. What will Montag's response be to reading? How will that change him? What's going to happen next? Is he going to take back all of these books or not? Many questions are on your mind and compel you to keep reading into chapter 2, or part 2, entitled The Sieve in the Sand. So for next week, we will be reading pages 65 to 88, which is the first part of part 2 of the Sieve and the Sand. And then the following week, we will finish up part 2. It's a little bit shorter than the first part there. Go ahead and check out the show notes. I've got a revised reading schedule, and I've actually put in those first 2 weeks of August. I'm going to take some time off because I'll be on vacation, and I didn't want to try to read and do some videos while I'm on vacation and all that, and then get behind again, because I just know I won't be able to. So I scheduled a little break there, and then we'll come back in the middle of August for part 3. We'll be in 2 parts. We'll finish up the novel by the end of August, and then in September we'll be discussing some of the history, context, and criticism section of the 60th anniversary edition of Fahrenheit 451. So that's kind of the proposed schedule. As always, things could happen where it gets delayed, so bear with me on that. I appreciate it so much. Please leave comments in the videos. We can discuss this further. I'd really be interested to know what you thought about Beatty's speech. Did some of the things there resonate with you? Do you want to push back against some of what I've said? Discussion is welcome there. And I'm really interested what you think about his speech. I think it's one of the most profound and insightful speeches given in literature that tracks how a society falls. And what's worrisome about that is I see our country in some ways, and maybe others as well, following this pattern. And it's like, no, stop, don't. Bradbury has written about what's going to happen, and he did it with some fair accuracy. Anyway, I'm enjoying this, enjoying your conversations. Join me again next week, Friday or Saturday. I'll have the video out. We'll get started on part 2. So until next time, take care, everyone, and happy reading.